Alrighty, it seems I'm live. Let's see how well this works. Today I'm going to be talking about learning disabilities or disorders or differences in behavior. I was chatting with a parent recently. Uh, their child was having huge meltdowns, and those meltdowns were escalating to include acts of violence, hitting, kicking, pinching, biting. And the parent wanted to know how to handle the meltdowns. And I thought, what if we could preempt the meltdowns? What if we could work with the child in a way that the meltdowns, comment moderation, not set, okay, that the meltdowns weren't even happening? Apparently, the child recently got a psychoed report, and it explained the learning problems of the child. I'm going to give one example. There was a memory problem. Accordingly, as the parent explained it to me, I didn't read the report, but as the parent explained it to me, their child had a short-term memory problem. And so we discussed that. I said, what does it mean to you that the child has a short-term memory problem? I said, well, we just have trouble remembering. And with the thought that they just have to try harder to remember. It doesn't work that way. I used a computer analogy. In a computer, there's the hard drive where information is stored, and then there's RAM. Information comes from the hard drive and into RAM where it can be worked on, manipulated, word processed, whatever. The more RAM you have, the more working memory you have available for fast actions. And it doesn't have to go back and forth to the hard drive, which is at a much slower pace for sorting out information. The more RAM your computer has, the more efficient it is, and the more information it can process at the same time. That's what helps make one computer faster than the other. So yeah, there's the actual processor, but importantly, the amount of RAM. So in this analogy, this parent's child actually has a small amount of RAM. So that means only small amounts of information can be played with at any single time in order to take in information, to learn, to work with that. So if I'm trying to understand this great big huge concept, it doesn't all fit in. It spills out. It doesn't even get in. Imagine the experience of the child. Here, you have to understand all of this. Child is overwhelmed. In fact, the experience of the child is that this expectation in and of itself is punishing because it goes beyond my capacity. It doesn't feel good. So for these kids, we have to limit the amount of information we're asking them to process at a particular time. Maybe there's a huge sheet of math questions they have to do. They look at that huge sheet with 20, 30 questions. Already that's overwhelming. They cannot take that all in. But if you were to write on a piece of paper, I'm doing this as we talk, and say, what's that? They're going to look at you like you're crazy and say, well, that's 10. I said, yeah, that was one of the questions on that whole sheet of paper. Really? I didn't see it. No, because you immediately got overwhelmed trying to take in all the information. So imagine now we did that for these kids. We chunked. We gave information in small chunks. I'll give you another analogy. I can't eat a whole pie in one mouthful. I'll choke. It'll kill me. I love pie, apple pie. But if I have a fork and I've given it a small piece, I can literally carve a little mouthful of pie onto my fork, and that I can take it. The parent asked me, should I tell my child that they have a learning disorder or disability? And I said, absolutely, absolutely. But disorder or disability, these are stigmatizing terms. So, a learning difference. Other kids, when they learn, they can take in this much information. When you learn, you can take in that much information. Other kids, physically, can barely climb a rope. You physically can hightail it up that rope. These are differences. Differences aren't inherently good or bad. They're just different. The degree to which we can accommodate to the difference, I feel relaxed. I feel capable. So if or when your child gets a diagnosis of a learning difference, we as the parent have to understand it. Not just a label. We really have to have a sense of what is the experience of the child with this difference. Because once we understand the experience of the child, that helps us to understand how to better meet their need. And quite frankly, when we meet anyone's needs successfully, anxiety and behavior tends to settle down. Punishment doesn't cure a learning difference. Punishment doesn't make working memory larger. Punishment is just an exercise in greater frustration for the child and a message to the child that they're inadequate. Understanding the learning difference and teaching within the capability of the child with that difference, that helps settle behavior. So if you're going to get an assessment, a psychoeducational assessment, and you've received it, whatever it says in there, speak with the assessor. And your question is, how does my child then learn? What is going on in my child's brain that is different from the other child? Just because they have a list of recommendations, do this, don't do that, do this, do this, do this, don't do that, do that, it doesn't mean you understand the nature and effect of the learning difference. You internalizing that as the parent and truly understanding that will help you to not just do, oh, I'll teach her this way, this way, this way, and this way. It's, now I also understand that when I'm giving my own child directions, 6 things to do before bed, their working memory is like this, not like this. A few of them aren't going to get in. Those things aren't going to get done. So that's not a non-compliant child. That's a child where the information didn't get into memory, didn't get solidified. That's not a bad child. So that means because I now understand this, maybe I'll only give my child 1, 2, or 3 things to do prior to bed. And when those are done, then I'll give the remaining 1, 2, or 3. I'm working within the child's capacity. So, hopefully this is of value to you. It's just a tidbit, a taster, something to consider when you're trying to understand a child's resistance to work or to schoolwork. Inadvertently, for whatever their learning difference is, it's overwhelming, it's inherently punishing. We have to understand the nature and effect of that difference to accommodate for it. I'm Gary Derenfeld. I'm a social worker. A visual checklist or reminder can often help. Yep, because that's an external working memory aid. I have it there beside me, so I can refer back to that. Oh yes, keep on. Oh yeah, I didn't do that. Okay. I'm Gary Derenfeld. I'm a social worker. YourSocialWorker.com. I hope this was of value. Now I have to learn how to end a video live. Here we go. Take care, folks.